it's Robin and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be covering a case that is very old, so I'm going to try to be as accurate as possible, but it was a little hard to get the more finer details, but I did as much digging as possible, and so I'm going to try to include it all in here. So like I was saying, this case is very old. It actually went unsolved for almost 50 years, 47 years to be exact, but it has finally been solved, and we are going to talk about the case of Jody Loomis. Let's just dive right into this case and talk about really who Jody Loomis was. So in the summer of 1972, Jody Loomis was living in a home in Washington with her parents, her fiance, and her sister, who was 12 years old at the time. She had recently celebrated her 20th birthday in June. If someone was to describe Jody, they would describe her as exceedingly talented and artistic. Jody would paint her bedroom walls with murals of running horses, and that pretty much embodied who she was and the thing she had a passion for: art and horses. She even had her own horse named Saudi, and her horse lived in a stable not too far from her, about only 6 miles away. She would often make trips to see her horse, and since it was only 6 miles away, she would take her bike. So on August 23rd of 1972, she took her white 10-speed bike and she got on it and she went to go to the stables to see her horse. This was nothing out of the usual. This was something she would normally do. So she rode her bike from her home to the pasture where her horse was boarded up. But unfortunately, she never made it to the field. She had pedaled about 3.5 miles up a logging trail when she crossed paths with her killer. Around 5:30 p.m. that same day, Jody Loomis was found by 18-year-old Kathy Linack and a male friend. Jody had been sexually assaulted and was found half naked, shot in the head with a .22 caliber bullet. She had been dumped in a heavily wooded area, and at the time she was found, she was actually still alive. Cindy Linack and her friend were able to get Jody into their car, and they attempted to get her to a nearby hospital. Unfortunately, Jody died on her way there. So there was an investigation that took place at the time of the murder. From that investigation, they were able to determine the weapon that she had been shot with, the .22 caliber gun. Also, the autopsy found that her clothing had been removed, that she had been sexually assaulted, and that it was very likely that she was trying to get dressed at the time she was shot. There was also things that were found missing at the scene of the crime, and that was her horse bridle and her bicycle. Her bicycle had actually been found and it was thrown down a steep embankment, but the horse bridle was never found. So that is still missing to this day. Now, there were several items from the crime scene that were preserved for the investigation that might have had DNA or been very important. It definitely helped solve this case, and it was what helped solve this case decades later. So I've spoken about it before in previous videos, but basically modern technology, DNA, and just all the improvements we've had is pretty much helping solve these cold cases. Her case went unsolved for decades, you know, like this was a long time coming pretty much. And it turns out, like I was saying about the evidence that they preserved, there was a boot in the evidence that Jody was wearing at the time of the murder, and it had semen on it. It had a semen stain. So basically what happened is, using the DNA from that stain, detectives were able to find a match using genetic genealogy. Basically what genetic genealogy is basically them using like whatever kind of DNA they have and being able to connect that to a relative of the DNA of the suspect. I don't know if that makes any sense. Let me just make this in simple terms. They essentially use a family tree, and on that family tree it'll have everyone and their DNA, and they're able to basically narrow it down to the suspect of who that person is just using a DNA sample from even a distant relative. So that's what that is. I don't know if I explained that well, but that's what that is. The suspect was found, and it was actually found out to be this man named Terrence Miller. And once they kind of identified him as the perfect suspect, you know, in the case, they did what you pretty much see happens in movies. They followed him throughout his day, and they waited until he threw out a coffee cup that he'd been sipping on, and they basically picked up that coffee cup. They got the DNA from that coffee cup, and they were able to confirm a DNA profile match. And that's awesome because that is enough probable cause to arrest him. And I think it's really crazy that they did it and I think it's a pretty solid case they have against him, even though it's not completely solid, you know, like it's not completely like, you know, lock him away and throw away the key. I feel like things like his address history, the weapons he's owned, things like that will further help this case like just end and help the family reach closure. So who is Terrence Miller? Well, let's just talk about who he would be like at the time of Jody Loomis's death. At that time, he would have been around 30 years old. He lived actually 5 miles away from where her body was found. So that puts him and places him in the area. Not only that, but he does have a sketchy history. He actually married a girl who was 14 while he was 18, which still, I'm sure in the time wasn't good. He had been accused of sexual crimes at least 5 times since the 1960s. 5 times. And in all but one of these cases, the charges were either deferred or never pressed. And deferred means basically people pretty much plead however they would like. But like a guilty, they'll defer it and make them do probation or something. And so that doesn't have to be reported on your criminal record after 7 years. Like, so you could be a sex offender pretty much, or have like, or be charged with a sexual crime, and it doesn't have to be reported unless you're like on a sex offender registry. But like if you're never made to be put on a sex offender registry from your deferred charge, then it's just almost like it never happened. He has had a history, but it doesn't seem like he ever really paid for it. And I'm sure no one knew he actually killed someone, allegedly. Regardless of this, I'm very happy that this 77-year-old man is arrested for this. I mean, this literally happened last month, and I believe he pled not guilty. But if they're able to build the case like I was saying, I'm sure he's gonna get jailed for the rest of his life. It's just really sad that he was able to live out his life. He's 77 years old. He's lived out his life. So I just find it really sad that he was able to live out his life. Wow. Jody Loomis was murdered when she was just starting her life. You know, like she was 20 years old. She was very young. She had a fiance, she had a life, you know, and it was just snatched away from her. So regardless, I hope justice is served for her, and I'm going to keep up with this case. I'm going to do, I actually need to do an update of a bunch of cases, so I might make a video for that. But I'm sure they'll be able to connect him to a murder weapon, and maybe we'll see if he kept her missing like horse bridle thing as a possible trophy. Who knows? I just hope that the detectives find out everything they can about him and, you know, get him locked up immediately, because the DNA matches, everything really adds up. I just hope they get this guy. But yes, I'm going to end this here. You guys comment down below what you think of this case. I think it's really sad, but I really think it's solved. I don't think that there's anything further from this. I really hope that they are able to prosecute this guy to the highest level. I don't care if he's 77 years old. I don't care if he's an older man. I want to see him go to jail for the rest of his life. I don't want him to be, you know, living like he never did such a horrendous thing to someone. It's just sick to me. But yeah, that's where I'm going to end this today. Thank you guys so much for watching. And as always, I love you guys. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. And I will see you guys next time. Bye.